For you, when does life start? When does a human being becomes a human being?
This is a question that I think will be debated through the centuries, and people come down to very different points of view.
But for you, what's that point?
It is not something that I feel like is really part of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, we work with women. I guess the way I'd really like to I think every woman has to make her own decision. What we do at Planned Parenthood is make sure that women have all their options for health care, and that they have the option to have a healthy pregnancy. They have option to put a child up for adoption if they decide to carry a pregnancy to term, or they have the right to make a decision to terminate a pregnancy.
But why would it be so controversial for you to say, when do you think life starts?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's controversial. I don't know that it's really relevant to the conversation. But I mean, for me, I'm a mother of 3 children. For me, life began when I delivered them. They've been probably the most important thing in my life ever since. But that was my own personal. That's my own personal decision.
Advocates of abortion go to great lengths to deflect, ignore, or deny the settled science proving the humanity of a child within the womb from the moment of conception. By rejecting the humanity of the child, it becomes much easier to corroborate the killing of something considered as not being human. Former Planned Parenthood Director Celine Richards describes for us the other services provided, yet according to Alexandria DeSanctis of National Review, in contrasting Planned Parenthood's 345,672 abortions in 2018 with the other actual services the group's facilities offered, Planned Parenthood offered 9,798 prenatal care services and made 4,279 adoption referrals, which means that its facilities performed 35 abortions for every instance of prenatal care and 81 abortions for every adoption referral. At the same time, the group obtained the largest share of its revenue from government reimbursements and grants, despite spending the entirety of Trump's presidency fundraising off of fear-mongering about how Republicans intended to block women from receiving, quote, reproductive health care, unquote. Although the abortion rate in the United States has declined steadily over the last several decades, Planned Parenthood's share of the annual abortions in the nation has continued to increase. In part 3 of our series, we will continue to look at the historical, biological, and philosophical progression leading up to today's placid compliance and immoral reasoning for the act of taking the life from a child awaiting its birth within their indoctrinated mother's womb. We must ask, what has led to our society to having so little regard for the life of another human being, a child, a baby awaiting birth? From Darwin's ideas on natural selection came eugenics. Sir Francis Galton first described eugenics, which means well-born, in the 1880s. Under Darwin's premise, human beings are not created, but rather bred. The science began to look for ways to breed an improved human race. This idea led to ideas on genetically engineered racial supremacy. In 1910, the center of the eugenics movement in the United States was the Eugenics Record Office. Biologist Charles Davenport, who established the ERO, was joined in his work by director Harry H. Laughlin. Both men were members of the American Breeders Association. Their view of eugenics as applies to human populations drew from the agricultural model of breeding the strongest and most capable members of a species while making certain that the weakest members do not reproduce. Both men were Darwinists and considered humans as animals. The organization that began its existence by sharing a combined office with the American Eugenics Society, who published the slogan, quote, fewer but fitter children, unquote. The organization then became the American Birth Control League, known today as Planned Parenthood, and Margaret Sanger is its founder.
Do you believe in sin? When I say believe, I don't mean to believe in committing sin. Do you believe there is such a thing as sin?
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin that people can commit.
Margaret Sanger in this interview was asked about sin, and she said, quote, "The greatest sin in the world has to be bringing children into the world that are diseased and have no chance to be a human being, practically delinquents, prisoners, and just marked when they are born," unquote. The solution to genetic inferiority, according to Margaret Sanger, was, quote, "a policy of immediate sterilization so that parenthood is absolutely prohibited to the feeble-minded," unquote. In 1943, Planned Parenthood's statement of goals included a desire to, quote, "foster selective pregnancy," unquote, and, quote, "to offer the eugenically unsound means to avoid bringing offspring into the world who would become social liabilities," unquote. Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist Party in Germany would adopt the American ideas of eugenics that Margaret Sanger proposed and justified in the Nazis' final solution of exterminating a people, denying their very humanity, their humanness, just as the present-day inheritors of Planned Parenthood and the pro-abortionists who deny the humanity of a child within the womb to this day. Supporters of abortion are often so presumptuous to know whether or not a child will have a good or bad life, or have economic disadvantages, or social and biological deficiencies that will inhibit the child from living what is arbitrarily described as, quote, "a meaningful and productive life," unquote. The shameless arrogance and haughtiness of such a belief comes from a reprobate mind and heart devoid of any faith or conviction in God, the Creator and Sustainer of all life. The iniquities of eugenics are contrary to the equality principles described in the Declaration of Independence, being the self-evident truth that all men are created equal by God in their humanity. A human being is indeed a human being, very distinct, very different than that of any other creature in this world, and every human being, regardless of economic class, health, or circumstances, has the right to their life, and no person is authorized or qualified to deprive life from another human being. Abortion destroys minority children at a rate that far exceeds that of white children. More African Americans have died from abortion than from AIDS, accidents, violent crimes, cancer, and heart disease combined. And in America today, a black child is 3 times more likely to be killed in the womb than a white child. Since 1973, abortion has reduced the black population by over 25%. Planned Parenthood operates the nation's largest chain of abortion clinics, and almost 80% of its facilities are in minority neighborhoods. About 13% of American women are black, but they submit to over 35% of the abortions. From 2013 to 2015, Planned Parenthood received $1.5 billion in taxpayer subsidies. In December of 2019, Phil Murphy and the Democrats in Trenton voted to provide $9.5 million in taxpayer subsidies to Planned Parenthood to help continue the lucrative abortion industry in New Jersey. Our responsibility as self-governing citizens starts with the elimination of taxpayer subsidies used to fund Planned Parenthood, crafting legislation against abortion, and propose constitutional amendments protecting the right to life of all persons from their very first heartbeat. Brands like women's health, reproductive health care, reproductive rights, and reproductive justice are designed to obscure the culture of death perpetrated by Planned Parenthood. Supporters of Planned Parenthood attempt to identify the services provided that do not include abortion. However, no number of mammograms and health screens can ever justify the culture of death that exists within Planned Parenthood facilities. Planned Parenthood has admitted that it's harvested aborted babies' body parts and supplied them to human tissue procurement companies. According to the Center for Medical Progress, the protagonists of abortion have since 1973 been successful in denying the humanity of the child being executed within the womb. For the child condemned to die has been denied basic human rights. The basic right to life is deemed by Supreme Court judges, as we will examine in our next video on the Supreme Court and abortion. Our responsibility as self-governing citizens starts with the elimination of taxpayer subsidies used to fund Planned Parenthood, crafting legislation against abortion, and proposing constitutional amendments protecting the right to life of all persons from their very first heartbeat. My name is J.R. Carmen of the New Jersey Constitutional Republicans.